I made one decision my wife thought was crazy. 3 hours before the first emergency broadcast, I spent $11,000 on a shipping container. My wife, Elena, stood in our driveway with her arms crossed, watching the flatbed truck reverse down our suburban street in Phoenix, Arizona. The neighbors were already looking. Mrs. Patterson had her phone out, probably texting the HOA president before the driver even killed the engine. "You've lost your mind," Elena said. Not shouting, worse than shouting. That flat, disappointed tone she reserved for moments when she believed I'd crossed from eccentric into genuinely unwell. "Marcus, we talked about the backyard renovation. We agreed on a patio extension. This is a metal box." I didn't argue with her. I couldn't explain the feeling that had been building in my chest for 6 weeks. The pressure behind my sternum every time I watched the news. The reports from Jakarta were buried on page 8 of every outlet. Small mentions. Unusual aggression in isolated hospital wards. Patients biting medical staff. 3 facilities locked down. Then 5. Then the stories stopped appearing altogether, which frightened me more than the stories themselves. "I need you to trust me on this," I told her. 6 months from now, if I'm wrong, we'll sell it. Use the money for the patio. Our daughter, Lily, was 14 and watching from her bedroom window on the 2nd floor. I saw her silhouette pull back when I looked up. She'd been distant that summer, earbuds in, door closed, communicating in single syllables. "Normal teenage withdrawal," Elena said. I wasn't sure anything was normal anymore. The driver, a heavy-set man named Gus, who smelled like diesel and Copenhagen, dropped the container at the back of our half-acre lot, right where the old elm had come down in March. It fit like it belonged there. 20 feet of corrugated steel, painted desert tan. I'd chosen the color specifically. From the street, behind the fence, it would blend with the landscape. "Sign here," Gus said, handing me a clipboard. "You preppers are keeping me busy this month. 3rd one I've delivered in this zip code." That detail stopped me. "3rd one?" "Yeah. 2 others on the east side. People are nervous about something." He shrugged, clearly uninterested in what. "None of my business. Stay safe out there." He drove away, and I stood looking at my purchase while Elena went inside without another word. The door didn't slam. That was worse too. A slam meant anger. Silence meant she was reconsidering the architecture of our marriage. I'd been a structural engineer for 16 years. I understood load-bearing walls, stress distribution, failure points. For the past month, I'd been applying those principles to societal infrastructure instead of buildings, and every calculation I ran told me the same thing. The systems we depended on were exactly 3 days from collapse at any given moment. Grocery supply chains, water treatment, emergency services. Everything operated on the assumption that tomorrow would resemble today. By 4 that afternoon, I'd already been inside the container twice, measuring walls, planning the interior. I had a notebook full of specifications, ventilation requirements, water storage calculations, reinforcement points for the doors. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Dean in Tucson. "Saw the Jakarta thing made CNN finally. Weird stuff. You watching this?" I typed back, "Come up this weekend. Bring your camping gear. All of it." He responded with a laughing emoji. At 6, Elena made dinner. We ate in silence while Lily scrolled her phone under the table. The television was off. Elena had stopped watching the news 3 weeks ago, said it made her anxious. I didn't push. Through our kitchen window, I could see the container sitting in the yard, catching the last orange light of a June sunset. It looked like a promise or a coffin. I wasn't sure which yet. at 9:47 that evening. The first emergency alert hit every phone in Maricopa County. By morning, the container would save our lives, but it wouldn't save all of us. The alert read like a form letter drafted by someone whose hands were shaking. Unusual public safety threat. Shelter in place. Avoid contact with individuals displaying erratic or aggressive behavior. Do not approach emergency rooms at this time. The phrasing hit me like voltage. Do not approach emergency rooms. That was the line that told me everything. When the system tells you to stay away from the system has already failed. Elena came downstairs holding her phone, face pale under the hallway light. Marcus. Just my name. No accusation now, no disappointment. A question wrapped inside 2 syllables. Get Lily, I said. Pack clothes for a week. Nothing sentimental. Layers, closed-toe shoes. I need both of you in the backyard in 15 minutes. She didn't argue. Something in the alert had crossed the threshold from my paranoia into her reality. She moved toward the stairs, then stopped. Should I call my mother? Elena's mother, Grace, lived alone in a retirement community 12 miles north in Scottsdale. 71 years old, sharp mind, bad knees. I thought about distance, road conditions, the time it would take. Call her now. Tell her to lock her doors and fill her bathtub with water. We'll figure out extraction tomorrow, when we know what we're dealing with. Lily appeared on the staircase in pajama shorts and a t-shirt, earbuds dangling around her neck. What's happening? Mom's freaking out. Get dressed. Jeans, boots, the hiking ones. Pack a bag. We're going outside. Outside where? It's 10 o'clock at... Lily. I never raised my voice with her. I raised it now. Not a shout. A compression of urgency into her name that made her step back. She went. I moved through the house with a checklist in my head that had existed for weeks, waiting. Kitchen. Every canned good into the duffel bags I kept in the garage. Gallons of water from the utility shelf, the first aid kit from under the bathroom sink, the camping stove and propane canisters from the garage rafters, my toolbox, the crowbar, the hatchet from the wood pile. From the bedroom closet safe, I pulled the Glock 19 I'd purchased 3 years ago over Elena's objections, and the 2 boxes of ammunition I'd added quietly last month. I tucked it into my waistband, feeling the weight change everything about how I moved through my own home. Outside, the neighborhood was half lit, porch lights clicking on. Mr. Reeves across the street stood on his lawn in a bathrobe, phone pressed to his ear. Down the block, I could hear a car starting, then another. Nobody was driving yet, but engines were waking up. The collective nervous system of a suburban street was beginning to fire. I unlocked the container with the padlock combination, our anniversary, 0614, and pulled the heavy doors open. Inside, empty steel walls, the smell of fresh metal, bare concrete where I'd laid quickset that morning as a floor. It wasn't a shelter yet. It was a shell. But shells keep things out. I made 3 trips from the house. Elena and Lily emerged on the third, Lily dragging a rolling suitcase over the grass, Elena carrying a cardboard box of food she'd swept from the pantry. Our eyes met across the dark yard. Something passed between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. The container no longer looked insane. It looked necessary. "We're sleeping in here tonight?" Lily asked, her voice smaller than her years. "Just tonight," Elena answered before I could. "Just until we understand what's happening." I pulled the doors closed from inside, and darkness swallowed us until I clicked on the LED lantern. 4 walls, 3 people. One decision made 3 hours ago that now separated us from whatever was unraveling beyond the steel. At 11:15, we heard the first scream. Not from our street, maybe 2 blocks east. A woman's voice, high and ragged, cutting off mid-breath in a way that meant nothing natural. Lily grabbed Elena's arm. I checked the Glock. The night was just beginning. None of us slept. I'd brought 2 sleeping bags and a wool blanket from the garage, spread them across the concrete floor. Elena sat against the far wall, Lily pressed into her side, both wrapped in the blanket. I sat near the doors with the lantern dimmed low, listening. The screams came in clusters, never from the same direction twice. Between midnight and 2 in the morning, I counted 11 distinct episodes, each one a burst of sound that fractured the suburban quiet like a stone through glass. Some were close, others distant, muffled by structures and the dry desert air. None lasted more than 10 seconds. That brevity terrified me. Whatever was ending these voices was doing so quickly. My phone still had signal. I scrolled through local feeds. Twitter was chaos. Videos from East Phoenix showing people running through intersections, a convenience store on fire, a shaky clip of someone on their hands and knees on a residential lawn, moving wrong. The movements were what stopped me. Not injured, not drunk. Something else entirely. A stuttering, overcorrected locomotion like a puppet learning to walk. "Let me see," Elena whispered. I tilted the screen toward her, then thought better of it when I saw the next video cued. A security camera angle showing 3 figures converging on a mail carrier. "Not yet," I said. "When it's light." "That bad?" "I don't know what it is yet." Dean called at 1:30. His voice was wire-tight. "Marcus, I'm watching the feeds. Tucson has 3 confirmed incidents south of Grant Road. People attacking people. Some kind of, I don't know. They're saying rage virus, they're saying chemical weapon. Nobody agrees." "Are you and Sarah safe?" "Locked in. She's packing. I'm thinking about coming to you at dawn." "Don't travel in the dark," I said. "Wait for light. Main roads. Don't stop for anything that doesn't look right." Define doesn't look right. You'll know. Trust the instinct that says move. Don't wait for confirmation. He was quiet for a moment. "That container you bought. That wasn't crazy, was it?" "Get here tomorrow, Dean." Yeah, okay." I hung up and checked the container doors. I'd secured them with a chain and the padlock from outside before we'd entered, threading it through the interior latch mechanism so it held from within. Not impenetrable, but resistant enough to buy time if something tested it. At 3 a.m., footsteps crossed our backyard. Not 1 set, 3, maybe 4, rapid, uneven. The sound of bodies moving through space without caution. No attempt at silence, no hesitation. They passed within 20 feet of the container. I could hear breathing through the corrugated steel. Wrong breathing, too fast, rhythmless, like lungs being operated by something that didn't understand their design. Elena's hand found mine in the dark. Her grip was crushing. Lily had buried her face in the blanket, but I could see her trembling. The footsteps receded toward the front of the property. Then came a crash, our front window, I was certain, followed by the sound of movement inside our house. Our home. The place where, 4 hours ago, we'd eaten dinner in silence and failed to talk about anything that mattered. They were inside for maybe 2 minutes. I heard things breaking, not searching, not ransacking for valuables, just destruction in motion. Then they moved on, through the back door, across the yard again. I tracked the sound past the container, over the back fence, into the Hendersons' property next door. A dog began barking. The Hendersons' German Shepherd, Rex. The barking turned to yelping. Then nothing. "Marcus," Elena breathed. "What are they?" I didn't answer because I didn't have a word yet. Infected, turned, sick. None of the language I'd absorbed from fiction seemed adequate for the sound of those lungs, that breathing through steel, the casual violence of bodies moving through a house like water through a broken dam. "We stay here," I said. "We don't open these doors until sunrise." No one argued. No one slept. The hours crawled forward on bleeding knees. Dawn came at 5:52 according to my phone. The battery was at 63%, and I'd already stopped checking the feeds. Cell service had degraded to a single bar that blinked in and out. The last coherent update I'd seen was a FEMA advisory directing people to 4 designated shelters across the valley. All of them were more than 8 miles away. All of them required open road travel. I opened the container doors with the hatchet in my right hand and the Glock in my left. The morning was already hot. June in Phoenix doesn't believe in transition. 90 degrees by 6, climbing every hour after. Our backyard looked almost normal. The grass needed mowing. The grill sat where I'd left it on Tuesday. Elena's herb garden lined the back fence in terracotta pots, but our house was wrong. The sliding glass door gaped open, its frame splintered. Inside, I could see the kitchen table overturned, chairs scattered. Through the hallway, the front window, confirmed, lay in shards across the entry tile. "Stay inside," I told Elena and Lily. "I'm going to check the house." "Don't," Elena started. "I need supplies from upstairs, tools from the garage. I'll be 4 minutes." The house smelled different. Not rot. It was too early for that. Something chemical and organic at once, like bile mixed with copper. I moved through room by room, hatchet up, checking corners. Nothing. They'd passed through without stopping. Just a current of destruction flowing from back to front and out. Upstairs, Lily's room had been entered. Her desk was overturned, her window was intact. My bedroom was untouched, which made no sense but wasn't worth questioning. I grabbed the bag I'd packed 2 weeks ago and hidden under the bed, a go bag Elena didn't know existed. Inside, water purification tablets, a compact solar charger, a handheld radio, a fixed blade knife, zip ties, duct tape, fire starters, and $200 in cash that would probably never matter again. From the garage, the portable generator, 2 5-gallon fuel cans, the hand pump water filter I'd bought for camping, and the collapsible rain catch I'd ordered online in April. I carried everything to the container in 2 trips, moving quickly, scanning the neighborhood between loads. The street was empty. Cars sat in driveways with doors open. Mr. Reeves' bathrobe lay crumpled on his front walk. No body. The Patterson house had its garage door up, both cars gone. Smart or fatal, depending on where they'd gone. On my second trip back, I saw the first one in daylight. Standing in the middle of the intersection 2 houses down. A man, tall, maybe mid-40s, wearing a polo shirt and khaki shorts, neighborhood dad clothing. But his posture was collapsed at the shoulders, head hanging forward at an angle that suggested either a cervical injury or a fundamental rewiring of how his brain told his body to stand. His hands hung at his sides, fingers curled into shapes that weren't fists, more like claws frozen mid-grasp. He wasn't moving toward me. He was just standing, existing in a way that radiated wrongness like heat from asphalt. I froze behind our fence, watching through the slats. 3 seconds. 5. He didn't turn. His chest rose and fell with that same arrhythmic breathing I'd heard through the container walls in the dark. I moved to the container and sealed us inside. "There's one on the street," I said, keeping my voice level. "Alive, but not right. We need to reinforce this space today. The doors are our weak point." Elena nodded. She'd transitioned overnight from skeptic to participant. No more arguments about the container, the money, my judgment. Survival has a way of collapsing the distance between "I told you so" and "please keep us alive." I began laying out the supplies on the container floor, sorting by category, mind already racing toward the next 12 hours. We had water for 4 days, food for 6, and no idea how long the world outside intended to keep burning. By noon, the temperature inside the container had reached 112 degrees. Steel absorbs Arizona sun like a mandate. I'd cut 2 ventilation holes near the ceiling using the angle grinder from my workshop, fitted them with mesh to keep insects out. But airflow was minimal. Lily lay on the sleeping bag with a wet cloth over her face, silent and miserable. Elena rationed water into measured cups, her movements precise and controlled. The organizational instinct of a woman who'd run a household for 15 years, finding new purpose in crisis arithmetic. I was on the roof. I'd climbed up to secure the rain catch frame, a project for monsoon season water collection, when I saw the broader picture for the first time. From 8 feet up, above the fence line, I could see 3 blocks in every direction. The world had changed overnight with the subtlety of a dropped piano. Cars angled across lawns. A plume of smoke rose from what I calculated was the strip mall on 40th Street. Maybe the gas station, maybe the dry cleaner. Impossible to tell. In the middle distance, a helicopter crossed east to west without slowing, without hovering, without any indication that rescue was its purpose. Military, by the silhouette, moving with somewhere to be that wasn't here. I counted 8 infected visible from my vantage point, all stationary, all standing in that same broken posture, distributed randomly across the landscape like chess pieces abandoned mid-game. One was in the Henderson's yard, feet from where Rex's chain lay empty on the grass. 2 others stood in the street at distances from each other that seemed neither deliberate nor accidental. Then a car turned onto our street from the south end. A white sedan, moving fast, engines screaming in second gear. The sound changed everything. Every standing figure pivoted simultaneously. Not turned, pivoted, like gun turrets acquiring a target. The synchronicity of it was the most disturbing thing I'd witnessed since the alert. The car passed them, almost. The infected didn't run so much as launch. 0 to sprint in a single explosive motion, crossing 20, 30 feet in seconds. 2 of them hit the car from the side as it accelerated. One went under the wheels. The other clung to the roof briefly before falling away at speed. The car fishtailed, corrected, and disappeared around the corner onto 38th Street. Sound was the trigger. I filed that immediately. I climbed down and entered the container, sealing the doors. "We need to be silent," I said quietly. "Whatever these people are, whatever's happened to them, they respond to sound. Fast, coordinated." Elena's eyes were wide. "How many?" 8 that I could see, within 3 blocks. There could be more inside houses, dormant, waiting. Dormant? Lily pulled the cloth from her face. Her voice was steady, but her jaw was tight. She was holding her fear in her teeth. Like sleeping. More like standing by, conserving energy until something activates them. I was guessing, extrapolating from 90 seconds of observation. But the hypothesis felt right. They stood still until sound gave them purpose. "Then we don't make sound," Elena said. We whisper. We don't use the generator. We don't cook. Not during the day, I agreed. At night, I'm not sure yet. We need more information. My phone had lost service entirely by this point. The radio pulled in one repeating message on the AM band. A recorded loop directing people to the shelter locations. The shelters might be operational. They might be overrun. There was no way to know without traveling there, and travel meant exposure. Dean hadn't arrived. It was past noon. Tucson to Phoenix was 90 minutes under normal conditions. I tried not to think about what abnormal conditions meant for a man driving a truck through open desert highway with these things reacting to engine noise. I built a schedule instead. Water rationing. 2 cups per person every 4 hours. Food twice daily, cold only. Movement outside limited to essential supply runs at dawn and dusk, when visibility was transitional and the infected's visual acuity might be compromised. Structure against chaos, engineering against entropy, was all I knew how to do. Dean arrived at 4:17 in the afternoon, and he didn't arrive alone. His truck, a lifted Tacoma with aftermarket bumpers, rolled into our driveway with calculated slowness, engine barely above idle. He'd figured out the sound principle on his own. His wife, Sarah, sat in the passenger seat with their 8-year-old son, Noah, buckled in back. The truck bed was stacked. Coolers, plastic bins, camping gear, a rifle case. I met them at the container, having watched their approach from the vent hole. We communicated in gestures and whispers. Dean's face told a story of 90 miles that would need to be spoken later. Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't unbuckle Noah's car seat. Elena took over, lifting the boy out with practiced maternal efficiency while Sarah stood aside, hugging herself, breathing in controlled sips. Inside the container, with 7 people and supplies, the space compressed dramatically. 20 feet by 8 feet, 160 square feet. Divided by 7, that was less than 23 square feet per person. A prison cell averaged 48. The highway was clear until Picacho Peak, Dean finally said, once we were sealed inside and whispering. After that, cars everywhere. Pile-ups. We went off-road for 6 miles through the desert, blew a tire on a cattle guard, ran on the rim until I found pavement again. He paused. There was a rest stop near Eloy. There were people there that weren't people anymore. Walking between the cars, dozens of them. Sarah made a sound, small, contained. Noah pressed into her side. Did they follow you? I asked. No, we were quiet, slow. They didn't react until a motorcycle came through going fast. Then they all... He made a gesture with his hand. Explosive, convergent. The bike went down. We didn't stay to see the rest. So sound triggered them, regardless of location. Not just urban environments. The principle held across terrain. I added this to my mental model, building the pattern recognition that would keep us alive. How much fuel did you bring? I asked. 2 full 5-gallon cans, plus what's in the tank, maybe half. Food? 4 days for 3, maybe 2 days now, split 7 ways. The mathematics of survival had just gotten harder. 7 people. Water for approximately 2.5 days. Food for 3, maybe 4, if we cut portions to subsistence levels. The container was shelter, but it was not self-sustaining. We needed more. We needed to go out. That evening, while the others rested in the diminishing heat, I stood outside with Dean in the long shadow of the container. The neighborhood had gone completely silent. Even the infected seemed to have moved on, none visible from ground level. The smoke from 40th Street had thickened. painting the sunset a bruised purple that would have been beautiful in any other context. "We need to hit houses tomorrow," I said. "Early, first light. Every neighbor who left has a pantry we can use." Dean nodded. He'd always been the pragmatic one between us. A contractor by trade, comfortable with physical problem-solving. 2-man runs, fast, quiet, soft shoes. "We'll start with the Pattersons. They evacuated early. Their garage was open." "What about defense?" He glanced at the Glock on my hip. "I brought the .308 and a handgun, but gunfire. No guns unless it's the absolute last option. The sound would bring every one of them for blocks." "So what then? We just run?" "We don't get caught. We don't get seen. We move like we're already dead. No heat signature of panic, no sound signature of life." He almost smiled. "You've been thinking about this for a while. 6 weeks. And Elena, she knows you were right." I looked back at the container where my wife and daughter sheltered with his wife and son. "She knows we're alive. That's enough for now." It would have to be. The Patterson house yielded more than I expected. Their pantry was a suburban monument to bulk purchasing. Cases of canned soup, boxes of pasta, bottled water stacked 3 deep along the garage wall. They'd clearly been preparing for something without knowing what. The way so many people stockpile against an unnamed future, then leave it all behind when that future actually arrives. Dean and I moved through the house in socked feet, communicating with hand signals we improvised on the spot. Point, go there. Flat palm, stop. Fist, danger. We filled 4 duffel bags in 12 minutes and returned to the container without incident. The infected on our street had migrated overnight. I'd confirmed their absence from the roof at dawn. This emboldened us. We hit 3 more houses that morning. The Reeves home, the Martinez place on the corner, and a house 2 doors south whose owners I'd never met. The name on the mailbox read Chen. Each one empty. Each one a grocery store without a checkout line. By 9 o'clock, we'd accumulated enough provisions for 3 weeks if we maintained strict rationing. But the Chen house gave us something else. In their garage, behind a workbench, a compound bow with a full quiver. Target arrows, not broadheads, but the tips were steel and sharp enough. Silent weapon. I took it without hesitation. Dean found a machete in the Martinez shed. A landscaping tool, long-bladed, the edge dulled by years of clearing brush. He sharpened it on a concrete step until it sang against his thumbnail. "We look like characters in a bad movie," he whispered. "Bad movies don't usually get the survival parts wrong," I whispered back. "Just the dialogue." By afternoon, our container had transformed. Supplies lined the walls in organized rows. Water jugs filled the rear third. Elena had established a system, labels made from duct tape and marker, everything categorized. She'd found her role, controller of resources, architect of rationing. It suited her precision, her need for order within disorder. Sarah remained fragile. She sat with Noah in the corner they'd claimed, reading to him from a picture book she'd packed. The only concession to normalcy in a space that otherwise resembled a bunker. Her eyes stayed red-rimmed. She spoke rarely, and when she did, her sentences trailed into nothing. I worried about her. In survival conditions, the people who collapse inward are the ones who eventually make noise at the wrong moment. Not from malice, from breaking. Lily surprised me. She'd emerged from her teenage withdrawal like a snake shedding skin. She cataloged supplies with Elena, counted water jugs, asked intelligent questions about ventilation and waste management. At 14, she was confronting the end of her world with a competence that made my chest ache. "Dad," she said that afternoon, while I mounted the padlock on a secondary interior latch. How long are we staying in here? As long as we need to. That's not an answer. She was right. I set down the drill and faced her. I don't know, Lil. The government advisory says shelter in place. But we haven't heard an update since yesterday morning. The phones are dead. The radio just loops. I chose my words carefully. I think this is going to be longer than anyone is telling us. Weeks? Maybe. What about school? The question was so absurd and so achingly normal that I almost laughed. Instead, I pulled her into a sidearm hug, and she let me. The first physical affection she'd permitted in months. School's canceled, I said. Indefinitely. Good, she said. I hated algebra anyway. That night, we ate cold canned ravioli by lantern light. 7 people in a metal box, passing cans and plastic forks, avoiding eye contact with the reality that this was now life. Not a weekend camping trip, not a drill. The screams started again after dark, closer this time, much closer. The screams woke Noah. He cried, not loud, but in the silence of our container, even a child's whimper felt like a siren. Sarah covered his mouth with her hand, pulling him tight against her chest, her own face a mask of desperate control. The boy's eyes were wide and white in the dimness. Outside, something hit our back fence. The impact traveled through the ground into the container's floor. Then another impact, wood cracking. The fence was 6-foot cedar, decorative, not defensive. Whatever hit it wasn't trying to be quiet. Dean reached for his handgun. I caught his wrist and shook my head. We waited. Footsteps. Multiple. That arrhythmic gait I recognized now, the cadence of bodies that had forgotten how walking was supposed to sound. They crossed the yard, past the container, moved toward the house. I heard the already broken sliding door scrape against the frame as something pushed through it. They were in our house again. The sound of movement inside, not searching, not purposeful, just occupying space with a restless kinetic energy that reminded me of wasps trapped against a window. 5 minutes. 10. Then they moved on, out the front, the sound diminishing east. Noah had stopped crying. Sarah had stopped breathing. We all sat in the ringing silence that follows proximity to death. They came to the house, Elena whispered, her hand finding mine in the dark. They remember. They come back to places. I hadn't considered that. Pattern behavior. Returning to known stimuli. Our house had given them passage once. They'd mapped it. The container was new, unfamiliar, boring. But if we made it interesting, if sound leaked out, if the smell of cooking drifted through the vents, it would become a destination. We need to mask our presence, I said. Scent, sound, everything. No cooking. No talking above a whisper after dark. We seal the vents at night with cloth. We'll lose air circulation, but we keep scent containment. We'll suffocate, Dean said. Not in 7 hours. The volume of air in here supports 7 people for approximately 12 hours sealed. We'll open at dawn. You calculated that? Last week. He stared at me in the near darkness. I could feel the question he didn't ask. How long have you been planning for this exact scenario? Long enough. Not long enough. Both. The next morning, I made a decision that would fracture our group within 48 hours. I told Dean we needed to expand our territory. The container was survival. But it wasn't living. We needed a perimeter, a buffer zone, a way to see threats coming before they were at our walls. The Henderson house, I said, pointing over the fence. 2 stories, clear sight lines. If we secure the upper floor, We have a watchtower. That means being in a house, with windows, with entry points. We reinforce. Board the ground floor. Use it for observation only. Sleep here. Watch from there. Elena overheard and inserted herself into the conversation with the authority of someone who decided she had equal say in strategic decisions. You're talking about splitting our attention between two locations. That's how groups get thin and people get caught between. It's how we avoid being surprised, I countered. Last night, they crossed our yard, and we had no warning until they hit the fence. If someone had been watching from the Hendersons' second floor, we'd have had 90 seconds of advance notice. And what would we have done with 90 seconds? Sealed the vents, held our breath, been ready instead of reactive. She absorbed this. The logic was sound. She could hear it, even if the risk sat heavy in her stomach. 14 years of marriage had taught me the exact moment Elena moved from resistance to reluctant agreement. The slight relaxation in her jaw. The redirecting of her gaze from my eyes to the middle distance where she processed alternatives and found none better. Fine, she said, but nobody goes alone. Nobody goes alone, I agreed. That rule would hold for 6 days. On the 7th, I'd break it and lose everything it was supposed to protect. The Henderson house was worse than I expected. Not damaged, worse than that. Lived in. They hadn't evacuated. The ground floor told its story in overturned furniture and a blood trail that began at the front door and ended at the kitchen island, where it pooled in a shape that suggested someone had tried to hold themselves together while coming apart. No bodies, just the evidence of bodies that had continued moving after they should have stopped. Rex's collar lay on the kitchen floor, tags still attached. I picked it up and put it in my pocket without knowing why. Dean and I cleared the upper floor in silence. 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, a hallway closet, all empty. The master bedroom faced our property. From its window, I could see the container, our yard, and 3 streets in multiple directions. Perfect sightline. Exactly what I needed. We boarded the downstairs windows, using lumber from the Hendersons' own garage. They'd been mid-renovation, bless their planning. The front and back doors got reinforced with 2x4s cross-barred into the frames. By afternoon, the ground floor was sealed. Access to the second floor was by ladder through a ceiling hatch we could pull up behind us. I established a watch rotation. 4-hour shifts, 2 people minimum in the container at all times. Dean and I would alternate the observation post. During the day, we could spot approaching threats. At night, we'd listen. The infected didn't seem to sleep, but they were less mobile in darkness and less triggered. I want a shift, Lily said that evening. No, Elena said immediately. I'm not a child. I can sit by a window and watch. You're 14. There are no more 14-year-olds, Mom. The words came out with a weight that silenced the container. She was right and wrong simultaneously. The world had reset the age at which childhood ended. But that didn't mean I wanted my daughter sitting alone, in a blood-stained house watching for the dead to walk. Daytime observation only, I compromised. With an adult present, you can be a second set of eyes. Elena's look told me we'd be discussing this privately. I accepted that inevitability. Day 4 brought a new variable. I was on observation when I saw them. 2 figures moving west along our street. Alive. Human. Moving with purpose and caution, the way we moved. A man and a woman. He carried a backpack and a baseball bat. She had a child strapped to her chest in a carrier. An infant. They were heading toward the intersection where I'd seen the infected man on day 1. He was gone now. drifted elsewhere. But they didn't know that. They moved along the hedge line, staying low, communicating in touches. I went downstairs and out the back, intercepting them at the corner of our property. They saw me and froze. The man's bat came up. "I'm alive," I whispered. "My family's here, 7 of us. Are you injured?" The man lowered the bat slowly. He was young, maybe 28, Latino, exhausted. A cut above his left eye, crusted and dark. "We've been walking since yesterday, from Chandler. Everything south of baseline is gone." "Gone how?" "Thousands of them, moving in groups like herds. We barely got out of our apartment complex." The woman, his wife, partner, I didn't ask, shifted the baby against her chest. The child was asleep. How? I couldn't imagine. "I'm Marcus," I said. "Do you need food? Water?" "We need walls," the man said. His name was Javier. His wife was Maria. The baby was 3 months old. They'd been walking for 18 hours. I brought them to the container. Elena made space without being asked. Sarah gave Maria water and a blanket. Noah stared at the baby with confused fascination, like he'd forgotten small humans existed. 9 people now. 160 square feet. The math was tightening. The walls were closing. Not from the infected, from the simple physics of too many bodies in too small a space. Something would have to give. 9 people in a shipping container for 6 days does things to the human psyche that no disaster preparedness manual addresses. The smell alone, sweat, breath, the chemical toilet I'd rigged from a bucket and trash bags in the corner behind a hung blanket. The sound of 9 people existing, shifting, sighing, coughing, the baby's intermittent cries that Maria suppressed with desperate nursing. The fracture started between Sarah and Elena. Not a fight, a corrosion. Sarah's paralysis had calcified into something like resentment, aimed at Elena's competence. Every time Elena counted rations or announced water schedules, Sarah's jaw tightened. On day 5, it surfaced. "You're not in charge of us," Sarah said, not whispering, speaking. In a container where sound was survival currency, her voice rang like a bell. Elena paused mid-count, a can of beans in each hand. "I'm making sure we don't run out. You're controlling everything, how much we eat, when we eat, like this is your house and we're guests." "Sarah," Dean started. "No, I'm saying it." She was standing now. Noah looked up from his spot on the floor where he'd been quietly drawing in a notebook with a crayon stub. "We didn't ask to be here. We came because Dean said Marcus had a plan. But this isn't a plan. It's a cage. We're in a cage." The word hung in the recycled air. Cage. She wasn't wrong about the physical reality, just about the alternative. "What would you prefer?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "I'd prefer to go to the shelters, the ones on the radio. There's one at the convention center. They have medicine, doctors, space. My son needs space." "The shelters might not exist anymore," I said. "That recording hasn't updated in 5 days. No new information. That either means they're too busy to broadcast or you're guessing. You're guessing, and we're trapped because of your guess." Dean put his hand on Sarah's arm. She shook it off. Maria held her baby tighter, eyes darting between the adults. Javier's hand rested on his bat handle, a reflexive gesture I clocked but didn't address. I chose my next words, like a surgeon choosing an incision site. "Tomorrow at dawn, Dean and I are doing a supply run 3 blocks north. The pharmacy on 38th. If there's anyone out there, other survivors, military, anyone, we'll find evidence. If the shelters are reachable, I'll tell you honestly. If they're not, I'll tell you that too. Sarah sat back down. The tension didn't leave. It just redistributed, sinking into the walls, absorbed by the steel that kept us alive and kept us compressed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Elena in the dark, our bodies not touching in the narrow space we'd claimed. Her breathing told me she was awake too. "She's not wrong," Elena whispered. "About the cage? About the control? You're making decisions for 9 people. You bought this container without consulting me. You decided when we moved in. You chose the Henderson house. You set the rules. Would you prefer a committee? I'd prefer a partner." The words landed somewhere deep, below the survival calculus, in the place where our marriage still existed as a thing that needed tending. I'd been so focused on keeping bodies alive that I'd forgotten the people inside those bodies had needs beyond oxygen and calories. "You're right," I said. "From tomorrow, we decide together. Anything that affects the group. All 9 of us. The adults, consensus on big moves. I'll share what I know, what I think, and we vote." She was quiet for a long time. Then her hand found mine, the second time since this began. "I'm sorry I called the container crazy. I'm sorry I didn't explain better. Would I have believed you? No. Then you made the right call. I don't want to make right calls alone. Then don't." We slept after that. Not well, but together in a way we hadn't been in months, long before the world ended. The pharmacy run nearly killed us, not because of the infected, because of the living. Dean and I reached the CVS on 38th Street at first light. The front doors were shattered, the interior ransacked, but not emptied. Pharmacies get hit for painkillers and antibiotics first, the behind-the-counter medications. Nobody thinks about the real survival necessities on the shelves. Electrolyte packets, antiseptic, bandages, petroleum jelly, vitamins, water purification drops in the camping section. We filled 2 bags in 7 minutes. We were exiting through the back loading dock when the truck appeared. A black pickup, heavily modified, pulling into the lot at speed. 4 men in the bed, armed visibly. Rifles, shotguns. The truck stopped and the men jumped down with the coordination of people who'd done this before. They hadn't seen us yet. We were in the shadow of the loading dock overhang, pressed flat against the wall. "Pharmacy's ours," one of them shouted. Actually shouted, full volume into the morning air. "Check it and clear it. We hit the sporting goods store next." I stopped breathing. These men were loud, deliberately loud. They either didn't know about the sound trigger or didn't care. Both options were equally dangerous to us. Dean's hand found my shoulder. His grip said what his mouth couldn't. "Move now, move quiet, move opposite." We slid along the back wall of the pharmacy, crossed the delivery alley, and cut through the neighboring business, a tax preparation office with an unlocked rear door. Through the building, out the front, across the street at a low run, putting 2 blocks between us and the armed men before I allowed myself to breathe again. Behind us, I heard gunfire. 3 shots, then the sound I'd learned to dread, that eruption of running infected, converging on noise. More shots, shouting, an engine revving, then a scream that was definitely human. We didn't look back. When we returned to the container and described what we'd seen, Javier was the first to respond. "Bandits," he said simply. "Already. We saw them in Chandler, too. Groups of men taking everything, going store to store. They're not scared of the infected. They use the noise to draw them to other people." "As a weapon?" Elena asked. As a distraction. Make noise near someone else's hiding spot. The infected converge on that location. Bandits loot somewhere else while they're occupied. The strategic sophistication of this chilled me more than the infected themselves. The dead, or whatever they were, operated on instinct. Simple input-output. Sound in, violence out. But humans using them as tools, redirecting them like attack dogs, that was deliberate evil. That was the threat I hadn't modeled. We can't stay invisible forever, Dean said. Those men are clearing this area systematically. Eventually, they'll work through these residential blocks. Then we need to not be here when they do, I said. This was the decision point. Day 7, stay or move. The container had saved us. My $11,000 impulse had bought us a week of breathing room when others had died in the first hours. But it was static, fixed, discoverable, a metal box that couldn't run. Where would we go? Maria asked. The baby, Lucia, they'd named her, was asleep in the makeshift crib Elena had constructed from a supply bin. The mountains, Dean said. North, Cave Creek area. Dispersed terrain. Hard to navigate in vehicles. The infected seem to stay in populated areas where there's stimuli. You're guessing, Sarah said. Same words as before. But this time her tone was different. Not accusatory. Afraid. Asking for reassurance that the guess was educated. I'm extrapolating, Dean replied. Every encounter we've had, every report Javier shared, they concentrate where people are, where there's noise, light, infrastructure. The desert is empty. Empty is safe. Empty is also waterless, Elena said. Empty is 120 degrees in July. She was right. Both things were true. We needed isolation from threats and proximity to resources. The equation had no clean solution. I proposed a compromise that would divide us permanently. We split into 2 groups, I said. The words felt like breaking something. 1 mobile, 1 stationary. The mobile team scouts a route north, identifies a viable location with water access. A ranch, a campground, anywhere with wells or natural water. The stationary team holds the container, maintains supplies, and waits for confirmation. You're talking about separating families, Elena said. I'm talking about not putting all 9 of us on a road we can't guarantee is safe. The debate lasted an hour. In the end, the vote fell along lines I should have predicted. Dean and I would go. Javier volunteered immediately. He'd already survived 18 hours of walking through infected territory. He had instincts the rest of us lacked. 3-person scout team, moving fast, moving quiet. The women would stay. Not because of some gendered protection instinct, because Elena was the logistical backbone of the stationary camp. Maria was nursing Lucia. And Sarah, despite her frustration, was not capable of the physical demands a scouting run would require. Lily would stay to help Elena. Noah needed his mother. We'd be gone 2 days, maximum 3. Radio contact via the handheld units Dean had brought. Range was 5 miles, enough to maintain communication until we cleared the urban zone. The plan made sense on paper. Every plan does. We left at dawn on day 8. 3 men with packs, weapons, and a hand-drawn map of routes north that avoided major roads. Our path. Residential streets to Cave Creek Road, then north along the wash beds that paralleled it. Natural corridors with tree cover and minimal exposed terrain. The first 5 miles were tense but uneventful. We moved in single file, 30 feet apart, each scanning a different sector. The infected we passed, 6 over 5 miles, were stationary, dormant, standing in yards, in parking lots, on sidewalks. We gave them wide berths and they didn't react. My theory was solidifying. Without stimulus, they powered down, conserving whatever metabolic resources drove them. But Phoenix's northern edge was a different story. Where residential gave way to desert, the transition wasn't clean. Strip malls, car dealerships, a sprawling high school campus. Each one held clusters of infected in higher density than I'd seen near our home. They're gathered around buildings, Javier observed from behind a concrete utility box we'd taken cover beside. Look, the school. 50, 60 of them, just standing around it. He was right. The high school parking lot held a mass of them. Silent, motionless. Arranged in loose clusters that resembled, I searched for the word, a crowd after a concert. Milling without direction, waiting for the next act. There are people inside, Dean said. He was looking through a small monocular he'd packed. Second floor, faces in the windows. They're trapped. I could see them too, barely. Shapes behind glass. A school that had become a fortress with the inmates above and the siege below. They were alive. They were unreachable. We couldn't help them without creating a disturbance that would activate 60 dormant infected simultaneously. We go around, I said. Wide, half a mile at least. Javier's face was tight. There are children in there. I know. We're leaving them. We can't extract dozens of people through a crowd of infected with a bow and a machete. We come back with a plan, or we don't come back at all. But dying in that parking lot helps nobody. Not them, not our families. He absorbed this. The moral geometry of survival, where the right thing and the possible thing occupy entirely different coordinates. I watched him process it. Saw the man he'd been before this war with the man this week was making him. Around, he agreed. We went wide. The school shrank behind us. The faces in the windows watched us go, if they could see us at all. I didn't look back. Couldn't afford the weight of it. 3 miles north, the desert opened up and the air changed. Fewer structures, fewer infected. The silence of uninhabited land. It felt like hope. It wasn't. The property we found was a horse ranch 2 miles past the developed fringe, accessible by a single dirt road that wound between rocky hills studded with saguaros. A metal gate, chained but not locked. A long drive to a cluster of buildings, main house, barn, 2 outbuildings, and a stock tank fed by a windmill pump that creaked in the afternoon breeze, turning slowly, pulling water from somewhere below the baked earth. We approached with weapons drawn. The main house was unlocked, empty. Dishes in the sink with a skin of mold. Refrigerator dead and stinking. We closed it without opening it. Beds were made. No signs of violence. The occupants had left voluntarily early. The stock tank held approximately 500 gallons. Murky but flowing. The windmill pump was operational, suggesting a functioning well. I tasted it. Mineral heavy but clean, drinkable with filtration. This is it, Dean said, standing in the shade of the barn. Defensible. Water source. Distance from population. The road is the only vehicle approach, and we can block it. Javier walked the perimeter. Fences are for livestock. Won't stop them. But there aren't any of them here, I said. That's the point. There's nothing to draw them. No people, no noise. The population density drops to near zero out here. Until we make it non-zero by living here, Javier countered. He had a point. Our presence would introduce stimuli into an empty environment. But controlled stimuli, whispered voices, minimal activity, no engines. might maintain the threshold below activation. We spent the afternoon cataloging the ranch's resources. A root cellar beneath the main house held canned goods, dried beans, rice, and a 20-pound bag of flour. The barn contained tools, fencing supplies, a hand-operated water pump, horse blankets, and a diesel generator we'd never use. One of the outbuildings was a workshop with a wood stove, heating for winter if this lasted that long. The other was a tack room we could convert to sleeping quarters. Water, food, shelter, distance. The 4 pillars of survival aligned for the first time since the alert. I radioed Elena at dusk. The handheld crackled with distance. We were at the edge of range, the signal thin and punctuated with static. "Found a ranch," I said. "North, safe, water, can hold all of us." Her voice came back broken by interference. "How far?" 12 miles from you. We'll plan extraction day after tomorrow. Be careful." Then, almost lost in static. We had visitors, not infected. Men. They drove past, didn't stop, but they slowed. The armed men from the pharmacy, or others like them. The clock was now ticking on our container's invisibility. A metal box in a residential yard is unremarkable for a week. After that, anyone observant enough to be surviving was observant enough to notice it as a potential target. "We'll be fast," I said. 2 days. 1, she said. "Come back in 1. The radio died before I could respond. Battery or range, impossible to know. I tried to call back. Nothing but static hiss. Dean watched me from the porch where he'd spread his sleeping bag. "Trouble?" Men near the container, passing, not engaging, but aware. "Then we leave at first light. We haven't secured this place yet. We secure our families first. This place doesn't walk away." He was right. The ranch would wait. Elena might not. I made the decision in the space between heartbeats. We'd leave Javier here to hold the location. Dean and I would return for the group, and we'd convoy everyone back. Javier agreed without hesitation. "I'll barricade the gate. Mark the route for you." That night, I slept on the ranch house floor with the smell of dust and hay in my lungs and the sound of the windmill turning above. Rhythmic, mechanical, almost peaceful. I dreamed of Elena alone in the container. Steel walls pressing inward. The sound of footsteps circling outside. I woke before dawn with my chest tight and my hands already reaching for my pack. We moved fast. Dean and I covered 12 miles in under 4 hours, running where terrain allowed, walking where caution demanded. The infected we passed remained inert. Morning seemed to be their lowest activity period. By 9 o'clock, we were back in our neighborhood, approaching from the north along the wash that bordered the property line. Something was wrong before I could identify what. A feeling. The way air changes before a storm, not visible but present on the skin. I held up a fist, and Dean stopped behind me. We crouched in the wash, peering over the bank toward the Henderson house in our backyard. The container doors were closed. The yard was empty. The Henderson house looked as we'd left it, boarded ground floor, intact upper windows. But the street beyond held a vehicle that hadn't been there when we left. A truck, dark blue or black, pulled up on the lawn of the house directly behind ours, facing our property. "That's not military," Dean whispered. "No." We circled east, using the wash for cover, and came up behind the Martinez house, where we had sightline to our container. From there, I saw them. 2 men sitting on lawn chairs in the shade of the neighboring house's carport, rifles across their laps, watching our container like they were waiting for a delivery. My blood went electric. They'd identified the container as inhabited. They were waiting for movement, for someone to emerge, confirm occupancy, reveal numbers and capabilities. Patient predators with the same survival calculus as us, but opposite morality. Elena, I breathed. She's in there with everyone. She knows not to open the doors. Unless they force the issue, Dean said. His face was granite. Sarah, Noah, we can't approach without them seeing us. We also can't leave them under siege. I studied the situation with every ounce of engineering logic I possessed. 2 visible hostiles, possibly more in the truck or inside the house they'd occupied, armed with rifles, distance weapons. Our advantages: surprise, knowledge of terrain, and the bow I carried with 10 arrows I'd practiced with every morning on the Henderson house roof. I need the high ground, I said. Henderson roof. I can reach it from the back without passing their sight line. And then what? You're going to shoot them with arrows? I'm going to create a distraction somewhere else. Draw the infected. Same trick Javier told us about. Dean's eyes widened, then narrowed as he processed the implications. You're going to draw them here. To those men. Not here. Close enough. Sound to the east. The infected between here and 40th Street. If I can activate them, they'll converge toward the noise. Those men will either run or fight, and either option gives us a window to extract our people. That's insane. It's physics. Sound in, violence out. And if they converge on the container instead? They won't. The container is silent. The noise will be east. They move toward noise. He was quiet for 10 seconds. I counted them. Then, what sound? I pulled the compact solar charger from my pack, then the handheld radio. The radio. Turned to max volume, broadcasting static. I set it on a timer. Duct tape the transmit button, leave it in a car 3 blocks east. It starts broadcasting. They come. That's a one-way device. You'd be placing it without protection. I know. He grabbed my arm, hard. I should do it. I'm faster. You're also louder, and your family needs you if this goes wrong. His grip loosened. The calculation behind his eyes reached its answer. Marcus, get to the Henderson house, upper floor. When you see the infected moving east, signal Elena. 3 knocks on the container from the yard side. She'll know. How will she know? Because we agreed. 3 knocks means family. I left him there. Moved east through the wash with the radio in my pack and the bow across my back and the absolute certainty that the next 30 minutes would determine whether my family lived or died. I chose a minivan 3 blocks east, parked in a driveway with both front windows rolled down. Perfect acoustic projection. I duct-taped the radio's transmit button, cranked the volume dial to maximum, and set it on the dashboard. The static was a buzzing roar. White noise at a volume that felt physically aggressive. It filled the street like an alarm. Then I ran. Behind me, within seconds, I heard them responding. That explosive activation, dormant to sprinting in one collective breath. I didn't count. I didn't look. I moved west along the wash, keeping my profile below the bank, running in the soft sand with my lungs burning and my legs churning and the sound of the convergence growing behind me, like a wave building toward shore. I was 400 meters west when the sound of the infected reached the vehicle. The volume attracted them from every direction. Every dormant figure within half a mile, pivoting, activating, converging on that single point of stimulus. Through the houses, over fences, across yards, a herd in motion. From my position in the wash, I could see our street. The 2 men in the lawn chairs were on their feet now, rifles up, looking east toward the commotion. One of them spoke into a walkie-talkie. Then they moved, fast, toward their truck. They were leaving. The cost-benefit analysis of their predatory patience had just shifted. They'd identified the sound as a threat magnet and wanted distance from its convergence radius. The truck started, pulled off the lawn, accelerated south, away from our street, away from the noise, away from the container. I watched them go with a relief so profound it bordered on physical pain. I was in our yard 90 seconds later. Dean was already there, having descended from the Henderson house at the truck's departure. He was knocking. 3 sharp raps on the container wall. The doors opened from inside, and Elena's face appeared. Taut and pale, but intact. Alive. "Get everyone out now," I said. "We're leaving, right now. Everything you can carry in 2 minutes." No one argued. The efficiency of fear surpassed any organizational system Elena had implemented. 9 people, 7 adults, 1 child, 1 infant, poured from the container in a stream of bodies and bags. Lily moved with purpose, 2 packs on her back. Maria had Lucia strapped to her chest and a bag over each shoulder. Noah clung to Sarah's hand, silent and wide-eyed. "Which way?" Elena asked. "North, through the wash. 12 miles to a ranch with water and walls. We move now while the infected are concentrated east." 12 miles. Sarah's voice cracked. "With a child? With a baby?" "We'll rest when we need to, but we leave now. Those men will come back, and the distraction won't last." Dean took point. I took rear. Between us, our group moved north through the wash at the fastest pace Noah's legs could manage. Behind us, I could still hear the infected converging on the radio signal. A storm compressed into 3 blocks, spending its fury on a minivan and a static signal. 2 miles into the wash, I looked back and saw smoke. Not from the radio, from our neighborhood. Multiple columns, widely spaced. The infected hadn't just converged. They dispersed after the sound died, flowing through houses, finding whoever was still hiding, creating chaos as a secondary effect of my primary distraction. I thought about the people we'd never met, the ones still sheltering in basements and bathrooms and closets within those blocks, the ones whose hiding places were now being breached because I'd rung a dinner bell to save my own family. The math of survival. Every equation requires something on the other side of the equals sign. I'd balanced ours with strangers' lives. I hadn't thought about it before doing it. I was thinking about it now. Elena's hand found my shoulder as we walked. "You're pale." "I'm fine." "You're not, but keep walking." I kept walking. We all did. North into the desert, leaving the burning suburb behind us like a memory we'd spend the rest of our lives trying not to examine. We reached the ranch at dusk. 12 miles over 8 hours, with stops every 40 minutes for Noah and water breaks for everyone. Javier met us at the gate. He'd heard us coming, the sound of 9 people trying to move quietly still louder than one person's silence. Lucia had cried twice on the journey. Both times, we froze. Both times, nothing came. The desert was empty of infected. Our theory held. Distance from population density equaled distance from threat. Out here, among the rocks and cactus and the cooling expanse of Sonoran scrubland, we were alone in the way that humans had been alone for most of history. The ranch felt like paradise after the container. Space, air, rooms with doors and windows that looked out on land instead of steel walls. Elena walked through the main house touching surfaces, the kitchen counter, the dining table, a wooden rocking chair on the porch, as if confirming that solid things still existed outside of corrugated metal. Lily claimed a corner of the tack room immediately, spreading her sleeping bag with territorial precision. Noah ran. Actually ran, the first time I'd seen him move without fear in a week, across the dusty yard between the house and barn. Sarah watched him with tears running silently down her face. Not sadness, release. "We made it," Dean said, standing beside me on the porch as the sun disappeared behind the mountains west of us. The sky was doing its Arizona thing, purple and orange and impossible, a palette that seemed inappropriate for the world it was coloring. "We survived a week," I corrected. "That's the first step, not the last." Always the engineer. Can't you just, for 1 minute, acknowledge that your crazy container and your crazy plan worked? I let myself feel it. 1 minute. The warmth of accomplishment, the relief of proximity to my family, the satisfaction of having read the situation correctly when everyone, Elena, society, the normal world, had told me I was wrong. Then the minute ended, and the planning resumed. Over the next 3 days, we established the ranch as a functioning survival outpost. Roles emerged organically. Dean handled structural fortification, reinforcing the gate, building an observation platform on the barn roof, creating deadfalls along the access road that would slow any vehicle approach. Javier took over food management. The garden plot behind the house had gone fallow, but the soil was viable, and seeds existed in the barn's storage cabinet. Long-term thinking. Elena managed water, tracking consumption, monitoring the tank levels, calculating how long the well would sustain 9 people at various activity levels. Her engineering mind finally applied to problems it was designed for. I coordinated everything, not as a dictator, as the integrator. Taking inputs from each person, identifying conflicts between needs, proposing solutions for group vote. The democratic structure I'd promised Elena held. When Sarah proposed we attempt contact with the convention center shelter, we voted. 5 against, 4 for. Sarah accepted the result without the friction that had characterized her container days. Maria revealed a skill set none of us had anticipated. She'd been a veterinary technician before Lucia was born. Animal medicine and human medicine share 80% of their knowledge base. She organized the medical supplies we'd gathered, inventoried our antibiotics, and established protocols for wound treatment that would prevent the infections, bacterial ones, that kill survivors as readily as any walking corpse. Lily proved herself on the observation platform. She had young eyes and patience I hadn't seen in her before. Hours of watching the horizon, noting animal movements, tracking weather patterns. She kept a log, handwritten, dated, precise. We were building something, not just surviving, constructing a life from the wreckage of life. It felt fragile and improbable and necessary. On the 4th night at the ranch, 11 days after the first alert, I sat on the porch with Elena and watched stars appear in a sky unmarred by city light. The Milky Way spilled overhead like someone had cracked the universe open. "Do you think it's everywhere?" she asked. "Yes," I said, because lying wouldn't serve her. "Then this might be permanent." "It might." She leaned into my shoulder. "I'm glad you bought the container." "I know." "I'm glad you're crazy." "I know that too." The radio contact came on day 15. I'd been scanning AM frequencies each morning from the barn roof. A ritual without expectation, turning the dial through static like prayer into an empty cathedral. But on that Tuesday, a voice broke through. "Military installation at Camp Verde. Repeat. U.S. Army forward operating base established at Camp Verde. Civilian intake processing active. All survivors in the northern Maricopa or southern Yavapai regions proceed to Camp Verde via Interstate 17 corridor. Military escort provided at mile marker 259 staging area. Repeat. The message looped. I listened to it 3 times, memorizing details, checking for consistency. It sounded legitimate. Formal military communication patterns, specific locations, procedural language. I brought it to the group. The reaction was divided in ways that no longer surprised me. Sarah wanted to go immediately. Military means safety. Doctors, walls, food we don't have to grow. Dean was cautious. Military also means orders, confiscation, loss of autonomy. We don't know what civilian intake processing means. Javier was quiet for a long time. Then, in Chandler, before we left, there were National Guard vehicles. They were evacuating people. Some of those evacuation sites were overrun within hours. Military presence doesn't mean military competence. Elena looked at me. The whole group looked at me, despite the democratic structure we'd built. In moments of genuine uncertainty, humans default to the person who's been right before. That weight settled on my shoulders like a physical mass. We send a scout team, I said. Not the whole group. 2 people. Confirm the base exists, assess conditions, report back. If it's real and safe, we go. If it's compromised, we stay. The vote was unanimous. Dean and I would go. Again. The familiar pattern of leaving my family to seek certainty in an uncertain landscape. We left at dawn on day 16. The route to Fort 17 required crossing 8 miles of desert, then picking up the highway north. Mile marker 259 was approximately 25 miles from the ranch, too far for a day trip. We'd need to camp overnight. The highway was a graveyard of vehicles. Abandoned, crashed, burned. The entire spectrum of automotive death stretched in both directions. We walked along the shoulder, stepping over luggage, around cars with open doors, past trucks with their contents spilled across the asphalt. No infected. The highway had been abandoned long enough that whatever had been here had drifted back toward population centers or deeper into dormancy. At mile marker 247, we found the first sign. A military-grade metal post driven into the shoulder with a reflective arrow pointing north and stenciled text. Camp Verde Intake. 12 miles. Official, recent. The paint was unfaded. At marker 253, we heard engines. Military engines, diesel, heavy, multiple. A convoy of 3 Humvees approached from the north, moving south. We stepped into view with hands raised. They stopped. Soldiers emerged with weapons ready but not aimed. Disciplined. A sergeant approached, young, maybe 25, face drawn with exhaustion but eyes sharp. Civilians? 2 of us here. 7 more at a ranch 12 miles west. Infected? No, clean. He nodded, spoke into his radio, then to us. Staging areas at marker 259. Bus runs every 6 hours to the base. Your group, can they travel? We have an infant and a child. We have vehicles. Give us coordinates. We'll extract. The efficiency of it stunned me. After 2 weeks of isolation, improvisation, and constant threat, the sudden presence of organized infrastructure felt almost disorienting, like stepping from a cave into fluorescent light. What's the situation at the base? I asked. 4,200 civilians, growing daily, medical, food, shelter, perimeter secure. He paused. It's not perfect. Nothing is anymore. But it's standing. Dean and I exchanged a look. This was real, verified, present and functional. We'll bring our people, I said. We'll be here. We turned south and walked back toward the ranch, toward our families, carrying in the news that tasted like the first clean water after days of thirst. Not salvation, but continuation. We reached the ranch by nightfall. I called the group together on the porch, and the words came out simply. It's real. Camp Verde. Military. Functional. They'll send vehicles for us. The reactions unfolded like dominoes. Sarah wept openly, the first time her tears carried relief instead of fear. Dean lifted Noah onto his shoulders and told him they were going somewhere safe. Maria clutched Lucia and looked at Javier, who nodded slowly, his jaw working through emotions he'd never been comfortable displaying. Elena stood beside me on the porch steps, her hand in mine, and said nothing. She didn't need to. Lily was the one who surprised me. Do we have to go? Everyone stopped. What? I asked. This place works. We have water, space. Javier's garden is sprouting. Why do we need to go somewhere with 4,200 strangers? That's 4,200 potential problems. She was 14. She was thinking like a 30-year-old. And she wasn't wrong, not entirely. The ranch offered independence. The base offered dependency on systems we couldn't control. Because what happens when someone gets appendicitis? Elena said gently. When Lucia needs vaccinations, when winter comes and the well slows. We're 9 people. 9 people can't sustain indefinitely. Lily processed this with the same focused attention she'd given the observation logs. Then, okay, but I want to come back here someday. Someday, I said. A promise I couldn't guarantee but made anyway. We packed the ranch over 2 days. Took everything portable. Food stores, tools, medical supplies, clothing, water containers. Left the structures standing, the windmill turning, the stock tank filling. A lifeboat we might need to return to. On day 19, 2 military trucks arrived at the gate. Professional, efficient. Soldiers who treated us not as refugees, but as survivors. The distinction was in their language, their eye contact, their respect for what we'd managed to endure without them. We loaded into the trucks. 9 people, our supplies, and the accumulated experience of 19 days that had reshaped every relationship, every assumption, every capacity within our group. Sarah climbed in with Noah on her lap and looked back at the ranch with something that might have been gratitude for the leaving rather than the staying. Dean sat across from me, arms crossed, watchful even within the safety of military steel. Javier held Maria's hand while Lucia slept between them. Elena sat beside me. Our shoulders touched with the truck's motion over rough terrain. Through the canvas back, I watched the ranch disappear. First the barn roof, then the windmill, then just the dust of the access road rising behind us like a final breath. 19 days, Elena said. 19 days. It feels like months. It feels like a previous life. The truck reached the highway, merged with other vehicles, other survivors being funneled toward the same destination. Through gaps in the canvas, I saw families in other trucks, faces that carried the same drawn geometry of endurance. We nodded at each other. No words needed. The shared vocabulary of having survived. Camp Verde rose in the distance. Concrete barriers, chain link topped with razor wire, guard towers, and beyond them, the movement of people. Thousands of them, living, organized, imperfect, but present. The truck passed through the gate. A soldier offered water bottles. A woman with a clipboard asked names, ages, medical needs. Elena squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt. We were inside. We were safe. The word felt foreign. I'd spent 19 days living in its absence, building systems to approximate it, engineering structures to simulate it. Now, offered the genuine article by forces larger than my planning could ever match, I didn't know how to receive it. Breathe, Elena whispered. I breathed. Lily stepped off the truck and looked at the sky. Blue, cloudless, infinite Arizona sky, and smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from her since before the alert. Since before the container. Since before I'd spent $11,000 to keep her alive. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 3 hours. That's what it came down to. 3 hours between an impulse that looked like insanity and a world that proved it was anything but. I bought a metal box. Elena thought I'd lost my mind. The neighbors were concerned. The HOA would have fined me, given time. Time ran out for fines and committees and the architecture of normalcy. What remained was steel and instinct, and the people I loved huddled in a space the size of a parking spot, breathing quietly while the world rewrote itself in violence outside our walls. I am not a hero of this story. I am a man who felt a pressure in his chest and trusted it, who listened when the silence from Jakarta spoke louder than the headlines, who spent money we didn't have on something we couldn't explain to solve a problem that didn't yet exist. Elena forgave me, not for the container, for the secrecy, for the months of quiet preparation that excluded her from the partnership we'd built. She was right to ask for better. I'll spend whatever comes next giving it to her. We survived, all 9 of us, not intact, not unchanged, but alive. The container saved us. The decision saved us. 3 hours, one choice, everything after.